So, Joe, question for you. Does choosing a life first solo business mean you're lazy?
Absolutely not.
Okay, that's our main point. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But that is the main point we want to get to. um, I I wanted to do this episode. It's funny because I actually have a personal story. So my husband and I are very different. I'm a busybody. I If we're watching something, I also need to be doing laundry or making dinner, or
Okay, so
I'm just
busy, yeah, let's define, because in my world, busybody means like a nosy person.
oh, say okay.
And I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
think
that's
you're a
probably the wrong
nosy
term. Not
person.
no, no. Thank you for clarifying. I just need to be doing something. I struggle with downtime. I like scheduling things on the calendar. My husband, he is so efficient with his work time that he does so much in his brain that he's so good at relaxing. Like he can prioritize doing a hobby or and it was funny at the beginning of our relationship, I'd be like, "You would just, like, sit and do nothing?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's called taking a break." Like, and he's so good at it, and I was thinking about, like, those differences and the way people view solopreneurship, or excuse me, life-first solopreneurship, and I think people often think if you aren't grinding as a solopreneur, you're lazy, and I had that misconception when I was first dating my husband for a little bit, like, "Get off the couch, dude," and he's like, "No, I'm actually just really efficient with my time." And that my husband's not a couch potato, like, "Get off the bike, dude." That would be the other one, he loves cycling. Um, but he was just like, "No, I'm really efficient with my time so that I can prioritize cycling and doing whatever I wanna do." Like, I can take those breaks, and I now see the world now almost 15 years later, I see the world completely differently from his lens, and I appreciate it so much, and I have to work on that. But I think a lot of solopreneurs have to work on that too, that if they're not grinding, it's not because they're lazy. And I think the whole lazy story comes from hustle culture conditioning. We've been taught to equate visible business and sacrifice with worth in the working world. And there's just an optics problem. A life first business often looks like doing less from the outside, like fewer hours, no team, no big launches. Um, but really, it's just their core distinction is laziness is avoidance of effort, but life first is intentional allocation of effort. And that's what I want to talk about today. Do you agree?
I totally agree. And I just like to dig in a little bit to the history of hustle culture, and it's funny because being older and kind of watching the world from, the middle of not quite the middle, but, near the middle of the 20th century on, in the 70s, in the late 60s and 70s, there was this, early 70s, there was this kind of hippie culture, which was very like, chill and, good times. And I mean, yeah, there were drugs but a lot of music and all this kind of chill. And then we came into the 80s with what we call the yuppies, right? Young urban professionals. And this was where, for me, hustle culture became the thing. It was because there was like, you make money, work crazy hours, make a lot of money, drive fancy cars, whatever it is, it was all about material stuff. And strangely, a lot of those people were the previously hippies. Don't know how that change came about, but if you look
Yeah.
at the ages, so this was really something that got embedded in me because I was going to college and getting my first jobs in the 80s, and it was like, I'd be in the lab because I was an engineer in those days. I'd be in the lab until 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock. Sometimes even sleep over and feel very kind of accomplished that I did this, and it's really warped. It's really warped thinking. I know I've talked about this before, but the idea of hustle culture and working your life away completely and not taking the time for the other things as a virtue is a really sick perspective, in my opinion, and one that I had to overcome. Uh, and still struggle with sometimes, to be perfectly honest. Because there's
Yeah.
always something more to do.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. For me, like my husband's like, you just need to sit and read a book. Because I'm like, well, but I could be doing this. I could be doing this. But I think because that's how we've been trained, like you said with the history, and thank you for the historical perspective. I think there's a reframe that Lazy is unwilling to do the work, but life first is unwilling to do the pointless work. So you're choosing constraints like fewer clients, capped hours, and saying no to things. And that's a harder discipline than defaulting to more, more, more. I just want more. So like if a solopreneur who declines a 60-hour launch to protect dinner with their kids, they're not avoiding work. They're just refusing to trade the thing that the business exists to protect.
And I'd like to frame it a little differently than that, even to say that, having dinner with your kids, if that's one of your goals, that is your work. I mean, we don't think of having dinner with family as work, but, you could frame it that way, that if you've defined a set of values that you want to live by, then anything that you do in pursuit of those values is in a sense work and should be treated as such and valued as such.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think like laziness has like if that's your design, laziness doesn't have a design behind it, but a life first business is engineered to make that your work. It's not opposite of lazy. It's just working with intention is how I would put it. And putting your like really figuring out those priorities. But I do have a caveat. I think people can use the term life first business as an excuse for being lazy. I think there's a middle ground where there's like life first business by design is not laziness, it's intention. And you put in the work, you just don't sacrifice the things that matter most to you. But I think some people, well, there's like that weird middle where like sometimes a life first is a costume for fear or procrastination. And I think listeners really need to check themselves and think, am I avoiding a hard thing and calling it a boundary? Is my freedom actually like stagnation? And also ask like, would I be proud to explain this choice or am I hiding from it? And I think those are really important questions to ask somebody to make sure they're not being lazy and not just saying life first and trying to cover it.
Right. No, that's a really good point because, we get into these tough things. You have to do something that is uncomfortable or just difficult, painful for you to do. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I really should take a little downtime or I should, go for that bike ride or that walk in the park because
Yeah.
I said I was going to, look out for my health. And it's like, sure. But if you're just avoiding things that are difficult, which let's face it, no matter how life first you design your business, you're going to do things you don't love doing, then yeah, that's a problem. So interesting
I think
point.
they should just do a gut check. Like if you're intentional and building that life first business, you should feel clear and calm about it. But if it feels defensive and you need to constantly clarify what you're doing and come up with excuses, then maybe you're not as intentional as you think you are.
If you think that doom scrolling is part of your life first business plan, you might want to
Mhm.
rethink that a little bit. Not that we don't all do some of that. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't sometimes scroll, but it certainly isn't something where I look back and go, yeah, mission accomplished.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just think building a business that support your life, I think requires more self knowledge and not less. You have to know what enough is to you, which we've talked about in a previous episode. You need to know what that enough is. You need to know that ceiling. And you just have to kind of redefine the metrics for yourself. Success isn't hours anymore, or maxed out revenue. It's alignment between how you spend your days and the life you actually are trying to live. And so if you've got that going and you build a business and that's and you have your own end goal in mind, then you're life first. You're not lazy.
And you got to start with that vision of what you want that life to look like. You're not necessarily going to get it immediately. Maybe you'll never quite get there perfectly, but if you don't have that vision built out for you, you're never going to get close. So
Yeah.
that's something I think a lot of solopreneurs that want a life first business deep down inside lack is that initial vision of what the life should look like.
I'm so glad you said that because the thing I wanted to end on today is I think the moral of the story is being lazy has no plan. The life first is all plan. It's all
Yep,
design.
absolutely.
Mic drop. Well, that's what I have. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I think we're good.
Great. Well, listeners, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you found this episode helpful, which I'm biased, but if you think somebody needs to hear this, please share it with that person. Leave us a 5-star review because it helps us build even more credibility and reach even more solopreneurs who would so appreciate that. And don't forget to subscribe to our show on any podcast platform, including YouTube. And we'll see you next time on the Life-First Solopreneur.